Your relationship with money matters. I'm Michelle Perkins, and this is the Money and You podcast, where I will be breaking down your relationship with money, offering tough love money tips, and a money dating plan that will focus on lifting the barriers to success to help pave the way for better money practices and increased wealth. It's time to take control to live a limit-free life. It starts today. Hello, hello. This is Michelle Perkins with the Money and You Show, and today is a great show with a wonderful guest. I'm super excited. I've had this sort of series of more millennial thinkers, and I'm really excited about that. I love the fresh outlook that they're bringing, and I'm learning a lot, and I'm actually just loving the energy and some of the changes that I see out there in the world of finance and work and everything else. So very excited about today's guest, who's going to bring some great financial information to you. And I just finished another show that was really on mindset. I mean, deep into mindset. And today this show is going to be a little more on the practical strategies around how to build wealth starting in your 30s for your family and for you and for your future. And I'm very excited about that because I love bringing the two together, the practical and the mindset, and having them work together because one doesn't work so well without the other. And so let's just talk for a minute about, when you're in your 20s. I was just reading a Kiplinger article that was talking about how 20s, it's kind of confusing. You're building skills, you're trying to figure out who you are. And then you move into your 30s, and that's really when you can start thinking about wealth building and some of the bigger sort of financial goals that you may have wanted to engage in, but in your 20s it's kind of an up and down time. That's not to say that for some people their 30s isn't an up and down time, and that's okay if it is. It's one of those things where we can't generalize too much in this area what's supposed to happen at different ages. But that said, and it's interesting because I've been hearing a lot of 20-year-olds talking about how difficult actually their 20s are or were because they're trying to figure things out. They're trying to make decisions. And so for some people, the 20s is a great time to think about your finances and build some foundational things like, a way to earn income. And then in your 30s, really launch into some larger wealth building ideas. So with that, I'm going to introduce today's guest, and his name is Joe Okaly. Joe is a CFP professional helping middle-class families make their lives more enjoyable through planning and financial education. He also has his own podcast, Enjoy More 30s, Family Finance, where he attempts to help young families learn the important concepts that were never taught in school and free them up from anxiety and make life more enjoyable. He's married to his awesome social media marketing wife, Lauren, and has 2 young children, Avery and Noah. Welcome, Joe.
Thank you so much for having me here today, Michelle. It's great to be here.
I'm so happy to have you here. And like I said, I love that you're going to help with, some practical tools and, ideas that people can implement. Tell me a little about this whole idea of, being in your 30s and starting in your 30s to do what you help people do. How did that come about? And just enlighten us a bit.
Yeah, sure. So it came about for me because I'm in my 30s. And so I could very much kind of relate to what was going on at this point in time. And I was very much like you described a couple minutes ago here, and how in your 20s, you're just kind of really trying to get started, get those wheels moving in some kind of direction, try to get some kind of traction with something that you might enjoy. And so for me, I was fortunate enough where my career happened to put me into financial planning. Going into college, I didn't even know this was a thing. One of my professors, thankfully, brought in somebody who did financial planning and said, like, hey, you could use all this Excel and statistics and mathematics and all this kind of stuff to actually help real people. And being from northern New Jersey, I thought that was fantastic because I just assumed I would have to commute into New York City and be kind of miserable for the first 5, 6, 10 years of my life. So that was a really great awakening for me. And when I went out and learned the position and started to help people, I just naturally used those things for myself. So when I got married, when I had kids, those same practical elements I could teach to myself, I could use in my own situation. And so while most of our clients tend to be older, of an older demographic, just because that's how most firms are. I mean, it takes a while to build up wealth. It takes a while to really seek out advice, maybe when you get closer to retirement. And so a lot of people go through their 30s, maybe even their 40s and 50s without any guidance or assistance. And so when I looked at my friends and family members that were in the same position as me and saw that they kind of had more financial anxiety than I did, and took a step back and asked why that might be, it was because I just happened to be taught these things that I could apply to my own situation. And I wasn't worried about what direction I was going in. I wasn't worried about what would happen to me if, or happen to my family, I should say, if something happened to me. And it just freed me up to be a better father, a better spouse, a better everything, and just make life more enjoyable for me and my family. And so that was really when I realized, hey, you know, other people in this situation are not getting help. There's very little financial education or literacy out there in school. Shakespeare, you know, all well and good. He doesn't really help you too much with your finances, though. And so I figured that that space, putting information out into that void, it was something that needed to be done, and I was thinking I could do it. So here we are today, and that's that the people I'm trying to reach and help, because there's not any other podcast or not any other resource that I've found, at least, that's geared specifically to people in their 30s that have started to get that traction, like you say, and, you know, are starting to look for help, but really aren't sure if there's any help out there, you know, for them specifically.
Oh, I love that. And yeah, you're right. 30s is kind of a funny decade. You see podcasts about, you know, your 40s, because that, you know, some mythical turning point, but, and of course, older. But yeah, 30s is, I look back and there are some investments that I made in my 30s. Specifically, I was working for Disney and I did the, you know, the stock purchase, employee stock purchase plan. And that served me quite well. I actually forgot I had it for like 10 years. And then somebody reminded me and I was like, oh, and there was some money in there. So, and it was just one of those automated things. It was simple. I wasn't giving the whole, you know, financial plan very much thought at that point. But when I look back, of course, you know, everything's hindsight, but I could have really done a lot in my 30s and made a huge difference later. It's a great time to start. And I feel maybe, I don't know, I'm curious if you're seeing this, because I have kids in their 20s and they seem a little more savvy about finances in general than I would have thought. And I don't know if it's social media and you know, people are just hearing more about financial ideas, but what are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I would say maybe there's more of a general interest in the 20s, but I would not say it's necessarily in good veins all the time.
Yeah.
So a good recent example is how cryptocurrency has become so huge over this last couple years. And so if people are in their 20s and they say, oh, look, everybody's making a ton of money really quickly using cryptocurrency, then they may be very likely just to jump into that without first doing the research on cryptocurrency, seeing if it fits what they're trying to actually accomplish, because cryptocurrency wasn't created to help make everybody a millionaire. Cryptocurrency was created to provide an alternate means of making transactions outside of the normal banking system. So that was the goal of cryptocurrency, to create an alternative means of exchanging goods and services. So, you know, when you look at it in that light, well, maybe that isn't the best fit for me specifically. So I would say it's great that there may be more of an interest for some younger people. It would just be how they're channeling that interest. Are they doing it through wanting to open up, say, a Roth IRA that's going to grow tax-free for a really long time? That would be fantastic. If it's trying to get rich really quickly, I would say that's probably not a good thing at any point in your life, because those things usually don't end up so positively for you.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It is interesting to watch, but okay, let's just go back to because I do think a lot of people miss that window of their 30s, and maybe there's a lot of reasons why they're not doing a lot of things, but it is such an opportune time. So what do you tell people who are building and getting some good jobs, but also spending more money because they're maybe buying a house or saving for a house, and they're doing certain things. They're also having fun. I mean, you still want to have fun in your 30s, and so how would you speak to somebody who's entering into their 30s and make it sound appealing to them? Because I think that's part of it is, they like the knowledge and the ideas, but actually, committing and having the discipline to make it happen is something else.
Sure. Yeah. And you definitely have to kind of want it to some degree.
Yeah.
So, where we see the biggest impact that can be made are for people that are in their 30s generally, who they start, they have their house, they bought the house, they have a couple kids, maybe, they just maybe got a promotion at their job. And now at this point, this is where they say, okay, I'm making more than I had before. I have the house, I have the kids, I'm doing some fun stuff already. I want to get on a good path today and not make any, significant mistakes. I want to kind of have some idea where I'm going or what I'm doing. And that kind of person can just do so much for their situation. Because when you're in your 30s, you just have all of this time. And that's the most important thing that anybody has at their disposal. When we have somebody come in at 65 about to retire, it's pretty much, I hope you did everything you were supposed to do over the last 35 years, right? Because however it is, it is. And I hope I can, make it all work out for you at this point, but there's no time left to really make any changes. Mm-hmm. So people that are in that kind of position that I just described in their 30s, where you're starting to move ahead with your career, I tell them to kind of start thinking about, what would make you happy? What direction or what path do you want to end up on? Because when you're in your 30s, you may look at your 401k and it may be, $100,000 or $200,000 if you've been saving really aggressively. But that amount of money translates to maybe $1 million or $2 million down the road when you're going to retire. So you may be much further along that retirement path than So it's really about just getting everything in order so that you have the protection that you need, you have some idea of what path you're going on investment-wise for your goals, and then that frees you up to say, I have some extra cash flow, or, I can go to Disney at extra time. That's what we want to do. You don't want to be that person that has a map that's completely blank with a "You are here" sticker in the middle. That's frightening. Yeah. So, that's the kind of person, the kind of situation where we see you can really make huge strides and clarify what direction you're going into, but even more importantly, make a huge impact for yourself and your family when you're that young with all the time that you have still at your disposal.
Yeah. And that's very empowering. I mean, to know that you're on that path and you've got some things going and you see the results of what you're doing, whether that's investing or whatever, it does build a lot of confidence, and it does, kind of take down some of that money anxiety, which is a blessing.
Those are the perfect words to use: empowering and confident. So you want to feel empowered about what you're doing, and the confidence to know what direction you're going in. It's it's like the old car trip. If your parents tell you it's going to take 2 hours and it takes 2.5 hours, you are a mess by the end of it. But if your parents tell you it's going to take 3 hours and it takes 2.5, you're jumping for joy as you get out of the car. Great job, Mom and Dad. Yeah. It's just all about your expectations. So creating that confidence of what you should expect and where you're going is really, really empowering. And we see it all the time with the young people that we work with.
Yeah. And do you, so for those young people, obviously they're not coming in, well, not obviously, but many of them are not coming in with boatloads of money to work with. So is that okay? Does that work for you?
Yeah. So I think that one of the biggest problems when it comes to wealth management is that it sounds really intimidating, right? Mm-hmm. It sounds like I should already have wealth, yeah, and now this person can manage it. Yeah. But in reality, most of the people that are at a financial planning firm, wealth management firm, whatever they're calling themselves, they got to that point because they did work with somebody. So, it would be more accurate to say, like, a want to be wealthy management firm. I think that would go a lot farther for people in the industry as a whole. So I would say really don't let that hold you back. There may be people out there, firms out there that don't want to work with you because you don't have enough built up. And that's okay. That means they're not a good fit for you.
Mm-hmm.
But there are other people, there are other firms out there like, my firm. I love working with young people because I love making that big of an impact. Like I said before, if I start working with somebody 1 year away from the retirement, the impact I can make is limited.
Yeah.
If I can work with somebody when they're young and they have income flexibility, they may not necessarily have, $1 million saved up, but if they have income flexibility, they got that promotion, now they're going in the right direction with their career, I can do a lot for those people and, show them what direction they're going into. And because they have some extra income, they can see what that income can do. Do you want to send your kids to college fully and retire a couple years later? Do you want to retire a couple years earlier? Do you and only pay for half of their college? Do you want to take extra family vacations every year? And okay, so that means you have to live for or work for a couple extra years. I could show them all those variables. So for me, it's empowering for me to be able to work with people where I can make that big of an impact for. I had a client recently that I started to work with within this last year. And they were, they didn't realize what a good position they were in, basically. They didn't have $1 million saved up, but they had enough and they lived in a lifestyle that they were on a great track. And so now after talking and we expanded what they would want to do and their goals, they're putting a pool in. And their financial advisor, me, encouraged them to put in a pool, which is a big expense. But for me, it's awesome because I know that for them and their kids now, over the next 18 years before they go off to college, I'm helping them create memories that they would have never had. And, I don't know how you really put a price tag on that, but for me, I mean, that's totally worth it. I get energized by being able to help people with that kind of stuff.
I love that because that is such a more holistic way of looking at it. And, I think in the older days, it was much more formulaic and much more rigid. And so I would have loved it if somebody sort of gave you, I think the way, we used to approach it was just don't tell the financial guy what you're doing if you're putting a pool in because, he wouldn't approve or whatever. And so I love that because you're allowing people to live their lives, which is the point of this as well.
Oh, absolutely. Money is just it's a tool. It's like a hammer or a
Right.
chisel. It's just, you have it so you can do something else and make something that you would enjoy. And we need to always make sure that we're remembering that money is a tool. It is not a goal in of itself. Having a big number on a piece of paper, I should say, is not fulfilling, doesn't make you happy. It's what can you do with that to translate into real life experiences, real life, things that you're doing with your family or friend, whoever it might be. Like that's the purpose of money.
I love that. And that really speaks to your relationship with money. What is that relationship and what is your mindset around money? And so if you relate to money that way, where it's a tool, it's helpful, it's not supposed to, dictate every decision that you make, but, it's part of most decisions, it seems like. But if it's not controlling them necessarily, I love what you just said because we can learn strategies and ways to manage our money and invest our money, all day, every day. But if you aren't relating well to money, then it's going to be a problem. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think the industry as a whole could probably do a better job teaching the people that are working with clients to focus more on that and focus less time on asset allocation training and more time on how to ask really good, insightful questions to help people understand what they can do, what they can't do, what they want to do, because that's why we're here. We're supposed to be here to help people have happier lives, not to help them do some kind of crazy asset allocation. That's, it's a part of it, needs to be understood, but it should not be the sole focus, in my opinion, at least, of how advisors are helping people.
yeah, thank you. Again, this is what I love about talking to millennials about money. It's just a very it's just a very evolved kind of way to look at it, and I love that. I have a money archetypes assessment that I do with people. And one thing I thought, boy, for financial planners, understanding where an individual is coming from in terms of their own money beliefs and their own patterns and habits and things would be so beneficial because, there are certain people you can't talk into something, and other people who you could talk into anything because just of their money beliefs. And so I do that assessment with people, and I always think that people in the financial world need to be assessing where their clients sit in terms of their own beliefs. So
that's great. Package it, make it a procedure, and get it out there, Michelle.
Yeah, I'll send it to you sometime.
Yeah.
But yeah, really, really powerful. So, okay, back to the practical. How do you sort of advise people to get started?
Sure.
And then once, I want to ask you that, but I also want to find out, because not everybody is at the beginning. So, once if somebody comes in and they're not really at the starting point, they have some experience with taking care of this already, then where do those people go? So, two-part question.
Sure. So everybody has three main parts to their situation. You have your investment strategy, you have your insurance protections, and you have your cash flow. So all three of these pieces, you want them to all be working together and going in the same direction for you. So when people are, either just getting started or maybe a little bit further along, those are the three pieces that I want you to be thinking about. Now, the piece that gets most easily overlooked is the protection piece. And this is the piece where we see almost every young family that we come across is not giving enough attention. Because who wants to think about dying? Mm-hmm. Who wants to think about getting disabled? Nobody. And I don't plan on dying or getting disabled or anything like that. But it's kind of the foundation of what you're trying to protect. If your house is beautiful and gorgeous and 5,000 square feet and it's put on top of a shoddy foundation, that whole thing is going to come down. So you need to make sure you're really looking at your protections first, because the most important asset that any younger person has is not their 401k, is not what they have in the bank, it's their future income potential. So if you think about what you're going to be earning over the next 30 years, it could be millions and millions and millions of dollars, depending on your situation, but it's a lot of money. So your future earning potential is actually your biggest asset when you're younger, and protecting that should really be your first priority. Now, the benefit of being young and trying to protect it is that insurance tends to be relatively affordable. So a term insurance policy for 30 years for a couple $1 million for somebody that's very healthy could be, a couple $100 a month, maybe even less than that, depending on your situation. So it's something that's very affordable, and it will protect your family, because when most people think of, I need a little bit of life insurance, it's like, I'll check off the box at work through my employer, and that's fine. I'm sure that's enough. Maybe it covers my mortgage, but I'm guessing just like me, you want your spouse to still be able to retire one day if something happened to you. You still want your kids to go to college one day if something happened to you. You still want them to, be able to eat food every day. And so, what you check off or 1 times or 2 times your salary isn't really going to fill in all those gaps for the next 30 years. So life and disability insurance are things that are not at all fun to talk about. I'm not trying to convince you they're fun to talk about. I'm just trying to convince you to look at them, because they're really important to make sure your family is well taken care of. So that's kind of that first box. The second one, when it comes to investments, that's the one that everybody focuses on. It can be a little bit intimidating at times. I would encourage everybody to try to be more boring with their investments, which may sound weird coming from an investment person, but you want your money to be going in the right direction. So if you're trying to, pick the hot stock or jump on the train that's really going to go far and go up, 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 that's not a tactic that tends to work long term. If there was any even professional money manager that was able to pick the right stock every time, all the time, everybody's money would probably be with them. My money would probably be with them. So it's much smarter, in my opinion, to be a little bit more boring with your investments, and they actually make it really easy now. So anybody out there that has a 401k or a work plan, you've probably seen different investment options. And a lot of those investment options might have a year attached to the end of them. So it might say like the target date 2050 fund or the target date 2060 fund. And what these funds basically do is they see, okay, 2060 is when this person plans to retire. So I can be a little bit more aggressive and I can spread out all their money everywhere all the time for them to go in that general direction and goal. So you don't have to pick how much to put in large cap growth or how much to put in small value or foreign bonds. This one fund, it's called an allocation fund. These are specifically target dated allocation funds, but it's one fund that spreads out all your money for you all the time. And even outside of work, you could have this as well. So, any of those companies that you see on TV that are investment companies, they all have these general allocation funds. So if you have a moderate risk tolerance, you could put money in a moderate allocation fund. And again, it's going to spread it out for you kind of everywhere all the time. And then just try not to touch it. So when you see stuff going on TV and everything's falling and fear is kind of out there, try to just take a step back and try to not touch it as much as possible, because it should not be invested anyway. If you need it in the short term over the next couple of years, it's just longer term money, and just let it kind of go in the right direction. So it's not about trying to hit a home run like some people are trying to do with cryptocurrency. It's about, just trying to go in that right direction over time. And an allocation fund is a way that you could do that. If you're using an advisor, I'm sure that they can kind of put it together for you. But if you're off on your own, you're trying to do this on your own, then an allocation fund is definitely what I would recommend, whether in your work plan or otherwise, to kind of start going in that right direction. The last thing when it comes to cash flow is just to make sure you always pay yourself first. Just give yourself some of the hardworking money that you're going out there trying to earn. You pay the mortgage company, you pay the grocery store, you work really hard for your money, and then we want to give it away to everybody else. So make sure you always pay some of your money to yourself first. That's a big one. It sounds silly. It sounds like, of course, you do that, but not everybody does that, because as you earn more, you tend to spend more. So that's the other thing that, just to be aware of, when you have more money coming in, make sure to stop and look at it and, say, where could this money go? So again, when I work with younger couples or younger families, we meet with them once a year. And so we see, okay, this year cumulatively now the husband maybe had a $5,000 increase in pay. The wife had $5,000 increase in pay. But overall, now they're making an extra $10,000 a year. That might be an extra $500 a month or $600 a month after taxes. Where's all that going? And so just that pause once a year to say, okay, we each made a little bit more, but that kind of, every year, if you make a little bit more, and you don't stop and say, okay, where do I want this to go? It's going to very likely disappear. And that's not a knock on you or anybody. That's just what happens. If you're not paying attention to it and being intentional where these new salary raises or bonuses are coming, then there's a very high chance that it's just going to kind of disappear.
Yeah, very high chance, and I think we all know that from personal experience somewhere.
I'm in that bucket too. I can't deny that. So even for myself, I do a review once a year with my wife, and we sit down and we go through everything. We update our goals. So I'm not above it. I do it myself too, to make sure that doesn't happen to me.
Yeah, I love that. And there were a few things that you mentioned that I just want to touch on. The protection piece, I think, is really interesting, because it isn't first on people's minds, and it isn't fun. You're right about all of that. But the thing is that once you set it up, there's nothing more to do with that one. It's like you just can relax and it's done, and there are tiny things to do with it. But it's one of those ones that you just take care of and you move on with your life. So, and it's a good feeling to have it done.
That's a great point too. Yeah. If you're doing a 30-year term policy for a couple $1 million, that should have 95% at least, if not higher, of your insurance needs are now, okay, you're done with that. You're locked in at a low premium. After 2 months, you're not even going to notice it anymore. And so that's a great point, that it's may not be fun, but it's a one-time not fun, and then it's done.
Yeah. And it is a nice sense of security as things happen in life, and that's there. So that's amazing. And then I think the paying yourself first point is really, really important, because I see that all the time, and I've done it myself, where there are lots of things to spend money on, especially for business owners, for entrepreneurs. As you start out, it's very easy to just say, well, the one place I can cut is my own salary. So I won't do that. I'll make sure everybody else gets paid and rent gets paid and what have you. But there's always this thought in your mind that pretty soon, when there's more cash flow, I'll start paying myself. And that pretty soon can be 5 years. It can be a long time. And it does take a lot of discipline to get that going, to pay yourself, to do savings for yourself, whatever that paying yourself looks like. Probably one of the most important things, because it's a habit, and the habit of not doing it is a habit. And, if you can switch that to the habit of doing it, again, pretty soon it's not a thing anymore, because it's like those automatic, Disney stock purchase payments. I didn't even remember them. They were so automatic that it flew right out of my brain.
No, that's fantastic. And now most work plans, they try to automate you from the start, which is great, because just like you, a lot of people would have a lot less saved if it wasn't kind of automated easily for them.
Yeah. So if you can automate that paying, to yourself, and get that happening first, and then the rest of the money is what you have to spend and use. So you said it sounds silly. It doesn't sound silly to me, because I see so many people not doing it. So I think it's a very important point. And it takes more discipline than one would think, especially when you're in some financial straits with your business or whatever. It's a real easy place to just dip into. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And even for people that have, successful businesses, let's say, even where they get to the point where they are paying themselves more, it's hard not to continue to invest more into your business, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. But just like if you asked anybody, is diversification good? Should you put all your money and all your eggs in one basket? People say no. And the same thing kind of goes when you're dealing with an entrepreneur and their organization. Sometimes, you love it so much. I mean, I'm an entrepreneur. I love it so much, but you have to remember, you want to also have something growing on the side that, again, is, boring maybe, but, long term, if it's spread out, it should definitely be going kind of in that right direction.
Yeah. And it's funny too. The fact that you're using the term boring, I'm thinking, I understand where you're coming from, but to me, it's more of a proven kind of thing, so that you don't really have to give it, again, too much time and attention. So in that sense, it's boring, because you don't have to watch it going up and down and make decisions every 5 minutes. But at least that's what I think you're getting at with boring.
Yeah. Boring is more like you said there, not as much like less maintenance. Let's say.
There you go. Yeah, and less maintenance is good, because if money is, again, you want to pay attention to it. You don't want it to be just constantly nagging at you. So I like that too. I think that helps create a nice relationship with money. When you have investments, you have the things set up, you're paying yourself automatically. Everything you mentioned could be handled easily. The one-time thing and the automation of the others makes it fairly simple. So you're not making a lot of money decisions. When you have to make a lot of money decisions throughout the day, that gets a bit taxing.
Yeah. I mean, from when we start working with a new client, and then we start, 2 to 3 years down the road, let's say, in that first meeting, there tends to be more stuff that needs to be done, because it's the first time we met with them. But 2 to 3 years later, when we meet with them, they come in and they're so much more relaxed, because they didn't think about money at all the last year. And they're okay. It's time for me to look at this stuff again once a year. Joe and everybody's going to kind of show me where I am, give me that confidence again. We're going to make some adjustments if we need to, little ones here or there. Right. But I know that I'm going to walk out of that meeting confident again. And now I don't have to think about it again for a year. So it's, it kind of exactly to what you're going to.
And for those people who do want more, they're a little more like, they have a high risk tolerance, and they want to be more aggressive. They want more to happen quickly, even if it's, riskier. What do you suggest to those people? Because they're maybe not looking for the boring stuff as much.
Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend, you could be aggressive in different ways. We would say to always be responsibly aggressive.
Okay.
So never be irresponsibly aggressive. So when you're creating an allocation, like when I talked about those allocation funds before, you're always using the same pieces. You're always using, large growth and small growth, all these different things that you may have heard of, but you're just mixing them together a little bit differently. So if you think of like how you make bread compared to muffins or something like that, or cake, all the ingredients are pretty much the same. It's
Yeah.
just how you're mixing them together is a little bit different. So it's the same thing. You can be more aggressive using a low maintenance kind of a model. Let's go with that verbiage instead, a lower maintenance kind of a model. And so you long term, you should receive a higher rate of return than if you were, using a moderate kind of allocation. It's just that the range of returns is a little bit wider that you could get, but in the long run, you should still go in that good direction and at a higher annualized rate long term. So it's just you can be aggressive. My accounts that I have for retirement, because I'm still many, many years away from retirement, are aggressive. But it's just being aggressive in what I would call at least a more responsible way. If you're trying to kind of guess and like jump from 0 to 120 miles per hour really quickly, it's not something that's probably going to work out for you. I've never come across any study that has shown that trying to time the market in that kind of way has ever worked out long term for people. Mm-hmm. So you might guess it, once or twice or 3 times, but at some point you guess wrong. And so, it's just being aggressive in a way that's, again, what I would call a little bit more responsible.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I do know people who love day trading, and for them it's fun. It's a hobby. And so, and other things like that. But so I don't know, is it okay for people to take a portion of their earnings and play with it that way? I mean, my guess is in your 30s, the answer would be yes, but I don't know.
It's all in what people are wanting to do. So what we say and what we share with our clients is we don't want to see any more than 15% being played with in that manner.
Okay.
And it's always up, anytime you work with an advisor, they're giving you what they think is the best advice for you.
Right.
So it's not we always say, this is what we would do. This is why we would do it this way. But ultimately it's your money, it's your decision. And so you should do what you're most comfortable with. And so when it comes to day trading and things of that nature, I don't personally do that. My job is as an advisor. I have all these letters and designations after my name, licenses, all this kind of stuff. I don't day trade because I don't think that it's something that people should be doing, because you don't really know how that's going to result 5 years from now, 10 years from now, a week from now.
Right.
So if I don't do it myself, I can't recommend anybody else to do it. Mm-hmm. So what we say is to limit it to no more than 15% of your overall investable assets. And when we do the projections for you, we are going to discount that piece of it, because there's a less likelihood of us really having a good understanding of what that's going to turn into down the road. So we're just clear with people on this is how much we think you should limit it to. And if you do it, these are the reasons why we're going to adjust for that and the projections that we're showing you, because we don't really know what that money is going to turn into. Is it going to triple or is it going to go to zero, depending on what your day trading practices might turn into?
Yeah, very interesting. Very, very reasonable approach. What along those lines, what would you advise a person in general, as far as a percentage that they should be investing, in the way you would advise? I mean, how do people look at that? How do they look at their earnings and their, net worth and decide what they can play with?
Sure. So I would say at a very minimum, maybe at least 5% you should be saving. People that we see that are on a really good track, it's more like 10 to 15% is what they're saving. And the first kind of thing that we always like seeing people take advantage of is if you are at a company that has a work plan and they offer a matching amount, you always really want to take advantage of that, like 9 times out of 10, if not higher than that.
Right.
But, because that's just free money. So if you're talking about, day trading and stuff like that and wanting to jump up really quickly, 100% return is about as good as you can get. So if you put in 3% to your work plan and your employer puts in another 3%, you kind of just made 100% on your money for free. Mm-hmm. So, matching is definitely something we almost always want to see people take advantage of if they can afford to do that. And then on top of that, I think, especially for young people, even if you can't save 5% now or 10% or 15%, you can get there because you're younger and your income is going to go up. So for you, even if you're on the lower side of that, don't worry. Just next time you get a raise, be more intentional about where that raise goes. And if you do that a couple years in a row, all of a sudden you're going to see, hey, I'm saving 10% or I'm saving 15% because I was more intentional with when my money increased, when my salary increased, when my bonus increased, I was more intentional with it. And now my savings rate jumped up significantly. So, for younger people in particular, I would say not to worry too much at this point where you are. Just if you pay more attention going forward, you're going to have a huge opportunity to make a real big difference in that category.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. And that's 5 or 10% of your after-tax earnings, or what number are we using?
We usually say the ratios that we work on are usually on gross income.
Okay.
So it'd be probably 5 to 10% of your gross income is what I would say. And that's different for everybody. The great thing about planning, and I'm 100% biased because I'm an advisor, and so I think having an advisor and a plan is great. But the great thing about planning is that when we can see where you're going and we can see what path you're on, then we can help tell you, like, hey, you're already on path. Like, if you're already good, I'll tell you to put in a pool. Like, you could do that. So it's not about just saving as much as you can.
Right.
It's about saving as much as you need to accomplish the goals in the timeline that you want to achieve them in. So that's that's where the line, I think, is a lot of times between doing it on yourself and having doing it with an advisor kind of a thing, to having that relationship with an advisor. If you're doing it by yourself, you can definitely do a lot of great things. You can go in a great direction, but it's really hard to get that projection 30 years from now to see kind of what direction you're going into and allow you to today say, I can put in a pool or I can go on an extra trip to Disney. Right. That part is really difficult because that's a lot of math. We use a lot of software to do that. But, at the very base level, you can do a ton of stuff on your own just by adjusting your mindset, protection, being intentional with your raises and saving more, taking advantage of the match. So there's a ton that you can do that is within your control.
Oh, I love that. And I also love the fact that not only, do you provide the advisory services and the knowledge and the right ways to do this, but there is that accountability factor. I mean, even if you don't think about money for a year, when you sit down with you get a reset. And I find that with my own advisor too, that, sometimes life just gets crazy and this is not your focus, and having those meetings really gets you re-energized around the whole process and ready to, you're either, it's exciting because you're looking at good results, or you're just giving yourself permission to sort of keep going or start again. So it's all
yeah,
good.
Absolutely. And it's all trade-offs. So the story that simplifies that kind of point to me is I had a really hard time letting go of mowing my own lawn. And it wasn't because I enjoyed it. It was just because I'm physically capable of doing it. So it seemed almost financially irresponsible to stop doing it. Why would I pay somebody else to do something that I could physically do myself? And the turning point for me came when I had kids. And it took me, let's say 1 to 2 hours every week to do that mowing and edging and all that kind of stuff. And so when I put it into terms of, would I rather spend an extra 20 to 30 hours every summer with my children, or would I rather mow my lawn and, save that $100? What would I rather do? And for me, then it made the decision really easy. I'd rather spend more time with my kids. And so just asking yourselves those kind of trade-offs and those questions, again, goes to kind of the intentionality of it. So, you could try to do it, yourself, Michelle. I'm sure you have enough knowledge that you could really, do a very good job for everything that you've experienced. But that doesn't mean that that's the trade-off that you necessarily want to make.
100%. I love that. I love that you said that. And it's been interesting because the millennial money people I've had on have always brought up time. And it's a lot about money. It's a lot about time. Time is what we really are trying to, get as much of as we can. And so, I love that. That's and yes, I'm, the older I get, the more I believe in support and help. And, have I done my own bookkeeping in the past? Yes. Do I do it now? No. Have I done my own taxes? Yes. Do I do them now? No. I mean, these are just, I don't even give it a second thought. And could I save money? Sure. But the time it would take me, just as you said, to keep up with the tax laws and everything else, that's okay. I have other things to do.
Yeah, and I mean, this generation is so fortunate, the millennial generation. So it's not like we've had some huge epiphany, in my opinion, where all of a sudden, this intelligence was just rained down on us by God. It was just that our parents and our grandparents did a lot of really hard things to put us in a position where we could now entertain these thoughts. Like my grandparents were worried about getting through the Great Depression and putting food on the table every week. So of course they said, work as much as you can, work as hard as you can, and get as much money as you need to, because you need to put food on the table. And then that affects their children. My mom and our parents, who they now are kind of a child of that, so they still have that in them somewhat. And now they took a little bit of a step, maybe more towards the millennial, with enjoying. There's more disposable income a little bit than obviously their parents had. And then the millennial generation had that to an even greater extent. We never had parents that lived through the Great Depression or anything like that. So this whole ability to value time and bring that discussion up is really a credit to me, at least, to all the people that came before us, the two generations before us that had to go through a lot of stuff to have us be here today. And so I hugely value time, but I also hugely value the people that came before me, the generations before us, that allowed us to even be in this position to consider it.
Wow, I'm going to wrap on that. That was beautifully said and really so profound. And I love that you said that. I appreciate that you said that. It's really important. And it speaks to your money beliefs. Our grandparents had completely different money beliefs based on the experience and the life that they had and the things that they were told growing up. And that's how it works. And so you have to look at what those beliefs are and how they are driving your decision making and your communication around money and everything else. So I love that you have that awareness of that. So thank you. That was really, really great. And I always leave the show with a money tip, a tough love money tip, so that people have to work a little bit at this. But would you like to leave people with a tough love money tip of your own?
Sure. So for everybody out there, my tough love money tip would be to talk about money. Money is so taboo. Nobody talks about it on social media. You'll see crazy spring break pictures, but nobody talks about money. Yeah. Your kids need that help from you. They're not learning it in school. They're not learning it in college. Like, nobody's teaching about anything. So if you have young kids, talk to them about money. Talk to them about, oh, this is how I pay my bills, or, this is what money is. And, if you have older kids, share with them kind of what you do with your money, how you felt secure in your situation, what things really worked for you. If we just all talked about money more, if we educated the generations more about money, it goes such a long way. And being in the industry, being an advisor, the people that are best with money, that are younger clients, are usually people that have parents that are also older clients of ours, and money and having them be on the right page and the right foot was really important to the parents, and they talked more openly about it. So for every generation, no matter where you are out there, I would very much encourage you to talk more about money, and let's all try to raise the financial literacy of the people around us, because it's more lacking than you may think.
Yeah, thank you. Again, beautiful advice and perfect. I love it. So tell us one more time how people can get a hold of you and listen to your podcast and everything else.
Sure, yeah. So my podcast is Enjoy More 30s. You can find that on any of the major podcast apps. The website is www.enjoymore30s. That's 30s.com. You can find me on normal places, LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, if you want to reach out directly through that. And then my company's website is New Horizons Wealth Management, so nhwmllc.com.
Great, and I'll put those in the show notes. And I'm so glad you were here. You contributed a lot to our listeners, and it was a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Michelle. I mean, hearing that you contributed at the end of a podcast interview is always a good thing. So happy to be here. Thanks for having me on today. And keep doing the good work.
Thank you. You too. Okay, listeners. Well, thank you for being here. I'm so glad that you are. You can join us every Monday night at ubngo.com at 7 p.m. on Mondays. And then the show will magically appear on all the podcast platforms that you might be listening to. Love it if you'd subscribe, leave a review, and you can also find the video on the Limit Free Life YouTube channel. So I hope this was helpful. I'm sure it was. And it was a really informative show, one to probably listen to a couple of times so you can grab all the tips and see how you can integrate some of them into your life. So go forth and prosper, and we will be here next week.